Today I'm sharing another weekly reading update. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about what I've been reading lately, and as I started to film this, I realized that I'm going to share 4 books, and out of the 4 books, 3 of them are actually middle grade, so I don't know how that happened. I'm actually buddy reading 2 other books right now, so they are really where my brain power is, so I guess that's why I picked up these others. On my nightstand, I always have just a few little what I call filler books to read, and that's basically what these are, and I happen to finish them this week. So let's talk about those. The first one I'm really excited to share with you because it was one of those treasure hunt finds. I go to all these thrift stores and I'm always on the hunt for these old vintage books, and I found this one. It's called Mystery of the Green Cat by Phyllis Whitney. Now what is so interesting about this is, if you know Phyllis Whitney, you know that she writes a lot of romantic, or she did. She wrote a lot of romantic suspense. It was very gothic type, a lot like Daphne du Maurier kind of books. So I have been gradually going through her romantic suspense type of books, and I've really enjoyed them. Some better than others, of course, because she was a prolific writer and she wrote a whole bunch of them. But I found this one, and this is actually a middle grade book that she wrote, and I had no idea she had written this whole series of middle grade mysteries. So now I'm going to be on the hunt for these, because these were the kind of books I read when I was a kid. This one's called Mystery of the Green Cat, and when I was a kid I devoured these because it's like Nancy Drew, and I was a huge Nancy Drew fan. I loved mysteries. I still enjoy mysteries, but as a kid these were the kind of books I wanted to pick up. And when it says mystery, yeah, I was in for that read. So I was happy to see this one because it did have that nostalgic feel. And I thought it's going to be similar to those books. And I was right. So I say all that to say this was a fun read. It's about this blended family. And I think this was written in the 1950s. 1957. So this is from the 1950s, and of course it reads like 1950s, but I didn't feel like it was so outdated that I couldn't enjoy it anyway. And again, it's only 100 pages long or so. I don't think it, maybe less than 200 pages, but it's about this blended family, and the parents are both widows. So they meet somehow and they marry, and both of them have children. So the mom has 2 girls and the dad has 2 sons. And so they move to where the father lives in San Francisco. The 2 girls and the mom, are now moving to this new city, so they're exploring it for the first time. So we explored it as a reader for the first time in the 1950s, so that made it even better. So there's a lot of other history going on in the story that was interesting, and you go on a little bit of a tour in San Francisco in the 1950s. So I thought that was fun and interesting, and it's not really city life, it's more about family life. So there's a underlying theme in this mystery of, this blended family and how they're going to get along, and how there's one brother who he's really struggling with this woman coming in replacing his mother, because he, of course his mother, I think she had passed away like 3 years prior. So there's that, but they are both artists. So there's this, she's trying to connect with him through his art kind of thing. So, and that's not the main part of the story. Again, it's one of these little mysteries, but I did appreciate that reading it as an adult, how Phyllis Whitney, brought that into the story to show this dynamic of this blended family. So I did enjoy that. The main character in the story, though, is the little girl, Jill. And when Jill moves to this new home, there is this beautiful, mysterious mansion up on the hill. Well, that's where the mystery takes place. There's an older lady who has all of these antiques, these Asian antiques, and she keeps wanting, when the little girl meets the older lady here, which I enjoyed that too, the dynamic between this young girl and this elderly person. I enjoyed that too in the story. But she keeps asking for her green cat, to help her find her green cat. And there is a mystery that we solve about the green cat. So I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was an interesting read. Again, it is from the 1950s, so it is dated in that aspect of it. But I really enjoyed it. I didn't think that it was too outdated. But again, I love vintage books, so there you have it. So I do recommend Mystery of the Green Cat if you were like me and enjoyed those Nancy Drew type mysteries. I will say though that I had no idea where this was going to go. Most of those mysteries are predictable, but this one was not. And so I was interested to find out what really was going on and solve this mystery. So I did enjoy Mystery of the Green Cat, and again by Phyllis Whitney, so that was a sweet surprise as well. The next one I read was Ruby Holler by Sharon Creech. Again, this was just one of those treasures I found at a library sale. I have read some Sharon Creech and I have enjoyed the ones that I've read, so I was interested, especially with that cover, Ruby Holler. It sounded like some sort of mountain setting on the countryside, and you know that I like to read those. And that is what it was. There are two orphans, Florida and Dallas. They're twins, and they live in this orphanage with these not so nice people, and they are considered the troublemakers in the group, and the punishments are very harsh for these children. But because they were dropped off at this orphanage, you know, as babies, they don't realize that this is abusive. But it's not hard to read. The way their attitude and the way that they describe it makes it an easier read for a middle grade. I guess I'm explaining that right. So it's not like you don't want to read it because of the details of what happens to them. It's told in more of a light-hearted way from these two twins, from Dallas and Florida's point of view. The point is, they don't realize that the things that are happening to them they're being mistreated, because that's just what they know. So they are considered troublemakers because they stand up for themselves, basically. And they are shifted back and forth, and it's really sad for these two kids. So the orphans move into the house at Ruby Holler, which is on the mountainside, with this older couple. This older couple, they've already raised their kids, and they are happily married and well grounded in their lives. So when these kids come along, they treat them like grandparents. So they let the kids go and explore and just be the kids that they need to be. And it's just a sweet story, because there is a struggle in it with Florida and Dallas not necessarily trusting this elderly couple to begin with, not understanding why that they don't punish them for certain things. So it's just an interesting dynamic between these Dallas and Florida, these two orphans, and this elderly couple. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a heartwarming story. It wasn't my favorite Sharon Creech, but it was a fun read, and I'm glad that I picked it up. The next one is y'all, before I talk about the book, one of you had told me about this book, Fog Magic by Julia Sawyer. I had read, I can't think of, The Light at Turn Rock. Is that the name of it? I had read another Julia Sawyer at Christmas time, and I really enjoyed it. I was so surprised by that book, and it just had me really thinking about the topics in that story. So when I mentioned it, a couple of you maybe mentioned Fog Magic by Julia Sawyer and said that it was a really good one. So thank you for mentioning the book, first of all, because I put it on hold immediately, and it came in a couple of weeks ago. Well, I wasn't able to pick it up from my library, so my husband dropped by to pick it up. And that happens all the time. My boys or my husband will drop by, and the branch that I pick up all my holds from is super small. It is actually an old train depot, and it's this tiny little building. I love it because in high school I was actually on the committee to start this library. So anyway, It's just a sweet little library in my neighborhood, and that's where I pick up all my books because it's walking distance from my home. Anyway, this particular day, my husband went in to pick up the book, and because it's such a small little library, you know, she recognizes us immediately and just, you know, has them there and here you go. Well, that particular day, because he picked it up instead, she told him to make sure to mention a book that she thought I would enjoy. And that just thrills my soul, that I have a librarian who is excited about books. Of course she is, she's a librarian, but still, you know, I'm a book lover. And when you go in and the librarian is anxious to tell you about this, you know, book, she can't wait to tell you about this certain book, it just makes you happy. And so I just was thrilled when I grabbed the book. My husband brought it in and he said, "Oh, the librarian left you a note." And she had a little sticky note on the front of this cover, and she had the book that she had just read that she wanted me to read too. And it just makes going to the library so much fun, doesn't it, just to have a connection with your librarian. So I hope that you have a great librarian where you are and that you do make a connection. And if you haven't, go make friends with your librarian, because you never know when she's going to help you find your next great read. But anyway, she had put this little sticky on this book, and it is Lessons in Chemistry. And I have heard people talk about Lessons in Chemistry. I think it was a pretty popular book last year. She just read it and she said, I need to read it too. So let me know if you've read Lessons in Chemistry. I'm going to have to put a hold on that one, I guess, at the library and pick that one up as soon as I can. But anyway, I picked up from the library Fog Magic by Julia Sawyer, and this actually is a Newbery Honor book. I didn't realize that. But I was really pleased with this one too. Again, it's not that long, and it was a quick read. It wasn't one that took me too long to read. But again, it's middle grade. And this one was magic realism. It had that, it's like a time slip in the story. And I was not expecting that. I really didn't have any expectations other than you as a commenter said it was a good book. In this one, there's a little girl, Greta, who is obsessed, infatuated, I don't know what the word is, but she loves the fog. And they live at the ocean. So most people that live in this village, this area, this town, they work with ships. So of course they don't like fog because fog is dangerous. But this child, ever since she is a baby, as she grows up, she just loves foggy weather. And when the fog comes, she's excited and wants to explore it. So one day she goes out and she sees in the thick fog, she sees the silhouette of a house, and she's interested and thinks, did I see that? Did I not? She keeps going. Well, lo and behold, she goes back in time to this village that was over the mountain, and she befriends the people there and learns about the history of this village that is not there anymore. It's deserted now in modern times, which this is not modern for us. This was written in 1943. So anyway, that doesn't matter. this little girl goes in the fog, and as the fog starts to fade away, she has to come back home. So anytime there is this dense fog, she goes over the mountain and she visits these other people in this village that when she goes back in the future to her, well, the present day, you know, it's deserted. It's not there anymore. I loved it. I thought it was a great read. It was super interesting. It was just the right amount of, you know, the magical realism that I like. You know, I do like a touch of that every now and then, and it was just the little time slip. I found it to be a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved Julia Sawyer's writing. So as soon as I finished this, I thought, I want to read more, because again, I loved the other one that I had read in December, and she's only written, unfortunately, I think 3 books. So I'm on the lookout for her other book. She was actually a librarian, which made it even better, and I think she just wrote 3 books, but I am going to look for the little picture book, because there's one little book that's a picture book that she wrote. Let me know if you've read it. I can't remember the name of it. But I'm going to be on the lookout for that, because I thought it would be fun to read everything she's written. even though the other one's a picture book. I'm curious to know what it is. I have a feeling I'm going to like that too. So finally, the last book that I read this past week was Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. This is another great example of magical realism, because that is exactly what this book is. I have really enjoyed Diane Setterfield's writing. I have these two on my shelf that I read in the past. Bellman in Black was the first one I read. My son bought this for me. I mean, I love the cover of that. My son bought this for me for Christmas many years ago. It's been several years now. And he bought it for me because it is Gothic fiction. So he knows how much I love the Gothic fiction. And with the black bird up there, it just, you know, the funeral clothes, it just looked like something that I would enjoy. And I did really enjoy this one. And then the other one I read last year was The 13th Tale, which a lot of people love this one. And now I have read her other book, Once Upon a River. I think this is the last one that I have for Diane Setterfield. I don't think she's written anything else. Let me know in the comments if I'm missing something, but I think that Diane Setterfield has only written these 3 novels. And I am interested in reading more. And I've got a few things to say about that. So let me first talk about Once Upon a River. I read this one this month in January because it was set around winter solstice, and I thought it would be a great time to read something cold, being you know, colder here, and I do like to do that. And I set out this year in January to read a bunch of cold wintry reads, and I succeeded because I've read some wonderful wintry reads this January. And so if you're interested in that, just look back on the last few videos, because I've talked about those in my weekly reading updates for January. Anyway, this one starts on winter solstice, and as soon as it started, I thought, okay, this is going to be a 5-star read. I just knew it was going to be a 5-star read from the beginning, because it had everything that I didn't realize it, but everything that I love in a book. And as soon as I read it, I went and grabbed my journal and made some notes, because I thought, yes, this is what I love about a good book. For me, this makes a good book. And it was the whole story within a story. She does that in The 13th Tale. She really doesn't do that in Bellman in Black, but there is this incident at the very beginning of Bellman in Black that you could consider that kind of sets things in motion. But definitely in The 13th Tale, she does that. There's a story within a story. And then in Once Upon a River, she does it even more brilliantly in Once Upon a River. This starts with this, okay, the first paragraph. I'll just have to start with the first paragraph. It says, "There was once an inn that sat peacefully on the bank of the Thames at Radcott, a day's walk from the source. There were a great many inns along the upper reaches of the Thames at the time of this story, and you could get drunk in all of them. But beyond the usual ale and cider, each one had some particular pleasure to offer. The Red Lion at Kelmanscott was musical. Bargemen played their fiddles in the evening, and cheesemakers sang plaintively of lost love. Inglesham had the Green Dragon, a tobacco-stained haven of contemplation. If you were a gambling man, the Stag at Eaton Hastings was the place for you, and if you preferred brawling, there was nowhere better than the Plough just outside Buscott. The Swan at Radcott had its own specialty. It was where you went for storytelling." Okay, I was sold immediately. That first paragraph drew me in. We're going to have storytelling. I'm ready for it. And so that's how it set in motion what I thought, okay, this is going to be a 5-star read. Because it gets even better in this first chapter, where you learn about this guy, Joe, who is this frail sort of man, and he ends up in this town at this inn, and as soon as he gets there, he knows this is where he's supposed to be. He never leaves. He stays there, and he becomes like this storyteller at this inn, and everybody loves the stories that he tells. Well, as you're learning about Joe and the storytelling, you learn about this legend from long ago And then there's another legend within that about this ferryman that they call Quietly on the river. So yes, it started out fantastic. Then it gets even better because on winter solstice, after you read all about the story within the story, this legend that happened before, then you learn, then the story starts and it sets in motion this story about this man comes in and he's got pretty much like this hole in his face, this gash in his face. And, you know, nobody knows who he is. He's in horrible shape. He's holding this puppet in his hand. And when he comes in, Joe's younger son, Jonathan, which has some issues too that take place in the story. You'll find out more about that later. He goes over and sort of catches the puppet as the man falls over. So they call for this woman that is like she's not a doctor or a nurse, but she's a medical person. She knows a lot about medicine, and so she's like a midwife in the area. They call her in to take care of this man. Well, while they are trying to see about this man, the little boy who has caught this so-called puppet realizes it's not a puppet, it is a dead little girl, a little 4-year-old girl who is dead. So they put the dead girl over in this other room. They see about the man. So then this midwife person, she goes over to see about this dead child, and the child starts breathing and opens their eyes. And everyone, of course, this now is a story to tell, and it just, you know, spreads like wildfire all through the town. And the story goes from there. There are a lot of characters in the story. It is like the river. And I think that was what Diane Setterfield was going for. She was trying to, you know, weave in the story of all these people, all of these characters like the river. So she used the river as a springboard for a metaphor through the story in several different ways. And I loved that about it. But it got a little complicated. It got a little it was a little overboard. For instance, there's a couple of characters in here that you are invested in from the very beginning, and then I didn't really see a point for them later. If you're going to give me, you know, a chapter or so telling me about this character, then I expect that character to be crucial to the story. And there were a couple of characters that kind of faded, and I didn't think that they were as important as she promised me at the beginning of the story. Again, though, Diane Setterfield could tell a great story. If you know of any books that are like this, that have that, it's, you know, with the gothic feel, with the folklore, I love that. A story within a story, a legend that sets everything in motion. I love that kind of story. I do hope that Diane Setterfield will write another one. Let me know if you've read Once Upon a River or any of these others by Diane Setterfield and your thoughts. It was fun to read Once Upon a River, which is magical realism, along with Fog Magic, which was middle grade magical realism. And it was interesting to see how these taken in different directions according to the audience that they were intended for. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at these two books too. So what have you been reading? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if you've read any of these as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.